Welcome to the AI Brief from the YPO Technology Network. I'm Stephen Forte. Almost every conversation about AI and work is built on the same assumption, and I want to spend today taking that assumption apart, because in a large part of the world, it is simply not true. The assumption is that your employees are on the receiving end of your AI decisions. That leadership decides, and then the organization adapts. And the interesting question is how kindly you manage that. In Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, France, Spain, and across the Nordics, that is not how it works. In those countries, your employees, through their representatives, are not the subject of the decision. They are a party to it by law. And if you run a company with people in any of those places, that changes something more practical than it sounds. It means your AI timeline is not actually yours. Let me start with the strongest version, which is Germany. German companies above a certain size have a works council. If you have not encountered one, it is an elected body of employees with statutory rights, and it is a very different animal from a union. Its powers are written into a law called the Works Constitution Act, and one particular provision matters enormously here. That provision gives the Works Council what German law calls co-determination over, and I am quoting, the introduction and use of technical devices designed to monitor the behavior or performance of employees. Now, you might reasonably hear that and think, fine, we are not installing surveillance software, so this does not apply to us. That is where nearly everybody gets it wrong. Germany's Federal Labor Court has read that provision broadly for over a decade. It applies not only to systems intended to monitor people, but to systems objectively capable of it. And once you say it out loud, the problem becomes obvious. A tool that logs what your staff typed into it, or scores how fast they closed tickets, or produces a dashboard of who did what, is capable of monitoring performance, whether or not anyone intended it that way. Most AI tools in an enterprise are capable of it, almost incidentally. So what does co-determination actually mean? This is the part that surprises people. It is not consultation. It is not a briefing. It means the employer and the Works Council have to reach a written agreement. If they cannot agree, the matter goes to a conciliation committee whose decision binds both sides. And until you have either the agreement or that decision, the measure cannot lawfully be implemented, not delayed, not frowned upon, generally ineffective. The Works Council can go to a labor court and get an injunction, and instructions your company issues on the basis of a system it introduced unilaterally may simply not bind the people receiving them. You can buy the software, roll it out, train people on it, and discover that none of it counts. And this is not only a German story, which is the part that catches multinationals. In the Netherlands, the Works Council holds a right of consent over rules on monitoring and evaluating employees, which is close to a veto in practice. Austria requires a works agreement for technical systems capable of surveilling staff. Across the Nordics, the co-determination tradition means you negotiate before you introduce, not after. Spain requires you to disclose the parameters, the rules, and the instructions behind any algorithm affecting working conditions, which is a remarkable thing to have to hand over. And France requires you to inform and consult its employee committee before the decision is final, which is a phrase worth noticing, because most companies consult after the decision and call it consultation. Last year, a French court showed what that word costs when you get it wrong. In a summary judgment, the court in Nanterre ordered a company's AI tools suspended while they were still in a pilot phase, until consultation with the employee committee had been properly completed, including allowing time for an external expert to be brought in. The company was also ordered to pay provisional compensation. Read that carefully. The tools were not banned. Nobody decided the AI was harmful. A court stopped a pilot on procedure. Now, let me give you the other side, because if I left it there, I would be telling you Europe has effectively outlawed AI at work. And that is not remotely true. In January of 2024, a works council in Hamburg went to court to stop its employer allowing staff to use ChatGPT and similar tools, and the works council lost. The employer had not installed anything. It had not put the tools on company devices or company servers. It had simply permitted employees to use these things voluntarily through their own private accounts, governed by a written policy, with no employer access to the data. The court held that no co-determination right was triggered and refused the injunction. Give the Hamburg court real credit for that, and I mean it. Faced with an enormously consequential new technology, it drew a narrow workable, sensible line instead of a maximalist one. That is not the usual instinct of a court handed a novel question. But look at what that line actually is, because this is the most useful idea in the episode. Two cases, broadly similar technology, opposite outcomes. And the distinguishing factor was not whether the AI was good or safe or intrusive, it was whether the company deployed it or merely permitted it. Company installation, company data, company control, the Works Council is a party to the decision. Employees using their own accounts under a policy, it is not. That distinction is architecture. It gets settled very early, usually in a technical conversation about single sign-on and data residency and which accounts connect to which systems. And it is almost always settled by people who have never heard the phrase Works Council in their lives. Let me be honest about the limits, because there is a version of this episode that overstates it. I went looking for a case where a Works Council permanently killed a specific named AI tool in any European country in the last 2 years. I could not find one. What I found is delay, suspension, renegotiation, and a great deal of leverage. That is meaningful, but it is not prohibition. German law does not ban AI, and works councils are generally not trying to. And I would add that the newest European obligation in this area, which starts next week, is only an information duty. Employers putting a high-risk AI system into service in a workplace have to tell the workforce and its representatives. Tell, not ask. So here's my read. If you are listening in Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Vienna, Stockholm, Paris, or Madrid, none of this is news to you. Your legal team has lived here for years, and my only observation is that the technology has quietly widened the definition of a monitoring system to include almost everything you are currently evaluating. If you are listening in Toronto, Dallas, Dubai, Singapore, Sydney, or Sao Paulo, and you have a subsidiary of 40 people in Munich, then the thing worth knowing is this. When your head office picks a global AI platform and sets a rollout date, that date is a fiction in several of your markets, not because anyone will object to the technology, because in those countries, the decision requires a counterparty. And acquiring a counterparty's agreement takes as long as it takes. And the deeper point is the one I would sit with. Everywhere else in the world, we debate AI and labor as though it were a contest between two sides, with one of them holding all the cards. A significant part of Europe answered that question decades ago in a completely different context, and the answer was structural. Employees are a party to decisions about the tools that measure them. Nobody designed that for artificial intelligence. It just happens to catch artificial intelligence almost perfectly, which brings me to the assumption I would retire. Most companies still treat a global technology rollout as one decision, made once with one date on it. It is not. It is one decision in most of your markets and a negotiation in a handful of others. And the handful is not where your engineers are looking. Your AI timeline does not belong to your plan. It belongs to your most protected workforce. That is the YPO Tech Network AI brief for Thursday, July 30th. I'm Stephen Forte. If this was useful, send it to a fellow member. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, stay sharp.